the book, The Right Side of History, How Reason and Moral Purpose made the West Great, by Ben Shapiro, came out in the summer of 2019. He's actually pumped out another book since then, but I have not read that one. So we're going to be talking about this one. So I think the first screen grab we've got is where he's sort of giving you the general thesis of the book about reason and moral purpose. So here's what he says. In order to fix ourselves, then, we must re-examine what we believe. We believe that freedom is built on the twin notions that God created every human in his image. I'm not going to keep reading it like that. And human beings are capable of exploring God's world. These notions were born in Jerusalem and Athens, respectively. He loves that phrase. He uses it like 10,000 times in this book. Mm-hmm. These twin notions, these diamonds of spiritual genius, built our civilization and built us as individuals. I'm just going to pause right there. Ryan, do you think you were built as an individual by Jerusalem and Athens and reason and moral purpose?
It sounds pretty plausible so far. Yeah.
Cool. If you believe that life is more than materialistic pleasures and pain avoidance, you're a product of Jerusalem and Athens. If you believe that the government has no right to intrude upon the exercise of your individual will, and you're bound by moral duty to pursue virtue, you're a product of Jerusalem and Athens. If you believe that human beings are capable of bettering our world through use of our reason and are bound by higher purpose to do so, you're a product of Jerusalem and Athens. All right, I think we've got a continuation of this passage. The next one, Jerusalem and Athens built science. The twin ideals of Judeo-Christian values and Greek natural law reasoning built human rights. I just want to pause here and say that it's too bad that Ben wasn't born in some nice like Midwestern Episcopalian family, or he wouldn't have to keep using this awkward phrase Judeo-Christian throughout this book. He could just say Christian because in 99% of its uses in this book, that does seem to be what he means.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They built prosperity, peace, and artistic beauty. Jerusalem and Athens built America, ended slavery, defeated the Nazis and the communists.
Wait. Who created slavery?
That is a fascinating question.
Who instituted it here? Was that Jerusalem and Athens, or was that someone else?
Yeah, was that like Damascus and Mexico City? I mean, who did that? Who did that one? I would also point out that they defeated the Nazis and the communists is an awkward phrase because, all value judgments aside, I mean, just as a matter of historical fact, I'm pretty sure, I vaguely recall, Battle of Stalingrad and all that stuff. I think one of those groups actually did quite a bit to defeat the other one, but
well, insofar as Stalin was defeating the Nazis, that was Jerusalem and Athens. But then his commie stuff, that was not Jerusalem and Athens, obviously.
Yeah. Jerusalem and Athens were the foundations of the Magna Carta, the Treaty of Westphalia. That's so random, the Treaty of Westphalia. Okay. The Magna Carta and the Treaty of Westphalia. They were the foundations of the Declaration of Independence, Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation, and Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter for Birmingham jail. Okay, I think we have one more for this passage. Civilizations that rejected Jerusalem and Athens and the tension between them have collapsed into dust.
All of them?
Yeah.
China doesn't exist. I
was kind of thinking China would be an interesting case for this view. That I think accepted it's not obvious what the influence of either of those things is on that that particular society. I mean, except very indirectly. But the USSR. Yeah, and also there are a lot of interesting questions you could ask here about earlier points in human history. But the USSR rejected Judeo-Christian values and Greek natural law, substituted the values of the collective and a new utopian vision of quote social justice unquote. Sidebar, totally what they called it in the USSR. And they starved and slaughtered tens of millions of human beings. The Nazis rejected Judeo-Christian values and Greek natural law. They shoved children into gas chambers. Venezuela rejects Judeo-Christian values and Greek natural law, and citizens of their oil-rich nation have been reduced to eating dogs. That last one is a particularly fun example because I'm not totally sure in what sense Venezuela, like, I don't know if it's Jerusalem or if it's Athens or if it's both of them. Like even the usual conservative thing there would just be like they had bad economic policies like that.
Right. But yeah, it's like what aspect? I just have a lot of questions here. Like, what aspect of Athens and Jerusalem specifically did Venezuela reject, or the USSR, or Nazi Germany? Like,
yeah.
I mean, the Nazis certainly saw themselves as continuous with Judeo-Christian values. Like, that's certainly at least how they viewed themselves.
Yeah, I actually remember my grandfather. Both of my grandfathers were in World War II, but the one on my mother's side saying he'd brought home this or I don't know, he had or one of his friends had this this they'd lifted from, I guess, some dead German soldier, this Nazi belt, and and it said Gott mit uns on it, God with us.
Yeah,
and
that's right. Yeah. And then you also, you have to, just, it's hard to even know where to start with this, but it's not exactly like, I guess Shapiro likes the Western European nations and America as the examples of civilizations that stuck with Greek natural law. just like, what the fuck does he think that means? I really want to know. But Greek natural law and Judeo-Christian values, but when our founding fathers were carrying out genocides, had they rejected Judeo-Christian values and Greek natural law, or
yeah, right. I probably shouldn't be doing this on the fly because I might be slightly messing up the details here. But Andrew Jackson, if I'm recalling correctly, actually had a saddle that was made from the skin of a killed Native person. So it's I don't know. I guess if you reject Greek natural law, you'll shove children into gas chambers, but if you accept it, you still might do that.
Yeah, right. God, all the stuff Columbus did, all the stuff we did settling this nation. The countless genocides carried out by most Western European nations.
Yeah, right.
So I guess all of that was in accordance with Greek natural law and Judeo-Christian values, but not the Nazis and not Stalin. So I want to pin down exactly what the breaking point is when exactly have you reached the point of rejecting Greek natural law? Which of the Greek natural laws did Stalin break that we did not break? I guess is what I want to know.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And it's I don't know. Also, I don't know. The Germany and Italy, all of the fascists seem to be at least really in love with the aesthetic of Greco-Roman civilization. Maybe they were
absolutely. If there's anything we learned from Indiana Jones, it's that the Nazis loved Christian artifacts. They were all about it.
That's true. That did come up in a couple of those movies. Yeah. Well, he does go on to to shed a little bit more light as it goes on about what he means by what he means by Greek natural law. So he says this later in the book. The final step away from Judeo-Christian ethical monotheism and Greek teleology and toward outright atheism came courtesy of the jolly British empiricist David Hume, 1711 to 1776. Having suffered through this entire book, and we'll tell you that he does this. He does every single goddamn time he quotes somebody, he gives their dates in parentheses. It's it just reeks of something that somebody would be doing for this 8th grade social studies presentation or something like that. Like you could sort of imagine a stack of 3x5 cards where he's got written down all the names and the birth and death dates.
So I guess he's already mentioned Hobbes and Spinoza before now. So that's why we don't get their dates.
Yeah, exactly. No, trust me. The first time he mentions Hobbes and Spinoza, he gives their dates.
Okay.
Like Hobbes and Spinoza before him, Hume discounted the possibility of miracles. He said that the laws of nature speak to us more frequently than any human testimony, and therefore the evidence for miracles was annihilated. Not a great summary, but we'll let that pass.
But I mean, but even with that, I'm like, is he going to argue against that argument, or is he just going to be like, I mean, he just says this, and how stupid?
Yeah, I guess from Shapiro's perspective, whatever's wrong with that argument is just self-evident. Like, it doesn't need to spell it out.
It's just.
I mean, I've got to say, I mean, like, I've always thought that the argument, on miracles is pretty good. Like that. This is the, there's like even the. I don't know. I mean, I remember used to do this with students at Rutgers and like sort of try to like spell out Hume's point and be like, look, you can just even take the supernatural aspect out of it. If you see me as an extremely reliable person, like I've never lied to you, you admire me, etc. And I tell you that last night, Vladimir Putin flew in on a secret plane and had dinner at my Jen's apartment. What would you be more inclined to believe? That happened? Or that this person who previously seemed honest and trustworthy was lying, insane, pulling your leg, hallucinating, like whatever probability you assign to each of those things put together, right? That or that actually happened.
Obviously that's crazy. But if I were to tell you that I saw a guy walk on water, you should believe me.
Right.
You should take my testimony.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So,
I would like to, I mean, given that he is the cool kid's philosopher, so if he finds this argument so self-evidently stupid, I would like to know why. Like, I'm very curious.
Yeah, no, that is what the New York Times called him. That happened. The cool kid's philosopher is the title of the article. And I think there were a bunch of quotes in there about he's a logic machine and all this stuff. And so, yeah, I would love to know what his response would be to that argument. He certainly doesn't give it here. It's actually your walking on water example is fun too, because that would be an example of a miracle claim that Ben Shapiro doesn't believe.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah. That's right.
That's the other one, right?
Yeah. Right. So that's the Judeo part, right?
Yeah, exactly, right. That's from the other end of the Judeo-Christian, which is, by the way, one of the hilarious things about this book, that like he constantly uses this phrase Judeo-Christian. It's really unclear what he means by the West. But one thing he definitely doesn't mean, like he's very explicit about this, is like Islam, right? That's not part of the West. And so like, okay, so what's the metric by which Judaism and Christianity are basically the same thing, but like Islam is not basically that same thing? Like that,
right?
I would just be fascinated to know this, but like, yeah. So this is also, in fact, this exact thing, that this would be a miracle that he doesn't believe in, like as an Orthodox Jew. Like this is one of Hume's points in that discussion. That Hume says that like even if you do give some sort of evidential value to the testimony, like the testimony of all the different miracles for all the different incompatible religious beliefs, can't cancel each other out. And again, whatever you think of that argument, it is kind of amazing that the cool kid's philosopher is just referencing it and like just saying, I'll look at this guy who's like, who's tearing down Judeo-Christian beliefs, and he's not telling you what's wrong with it.
I would love to. I would love to know why what his reasoning is for rejecting that particular miracle, but not others. And also, like, well, I guess I don't know. I'm actually ignorant on this. Like, what's the Islamic view of Jesus's miracles? Like, they accept him as a prophet, right? But I don't know if they accept all the miraculous stuff he's supposed to have done.
Yeah, that is a good question. I am not sure what the Muslim view is about that. Like, I know, Yeah, I know that there is like a version of the resurrection that's a little bit different. That's in the Quran, but yeah, I don't know what the miracle view is. But yes, that would be
Yeah.
good, relevant information. And again, there's also there are also Muslim miracle stories that nobody
Hmm.
in what Ben would consider to be the Judeo-Christian tradition believes. So
Hmm.
um, he uh, he uh, he even argued that polytheism was as rational as monotheism. Again,
Okay. I mean, A, tell us why not. B, this really makes it confusing, like in what sense he wants to call Athens and Jerusalem equally twin diamonds. But then like, oh, but wait a second, like the Greeks had a certain belief system.
yeah, right.
uh,
Like,
uh,
yeah. He's rejected this important. He's rejected this important ancient Greek wisdom by saying that it's not less rational to believe that there are multiple gods than that there's one God.
yeah.
He also attempted to demolish classical proofs of God's existence. He took on the cosmological argument by stating that it's quite possible for something to come from nothing. So the notion of an unmoved mover was unnecessary. Sidebar. This came up in the Charlie Kirk debate too. For some reason, all of these like young conservatives who want to think that they're great books types love this phrase, the unmoved mover. I don't know why that is, but
yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I've noticed that too. It's strange. But
yeah. Also, this is we can stop doing every one of these, but I'll just say like read David Hume's dialogues concerning natural religion. This is not a good summary.
yeah, no.
Most of all, Hume rejected the idea of a just God because the presence of evil in the universe. Again, don't have to dwell on it, but like that does seem like an argument that the cool kids philosopher could perhaps respond to.
Yeah, it would be nice. I guess that's just another self-evidently stupid thing Hume said to turn us all into atheists. But I would like to know what's wrong with it. I've always found that to be a pretty convincing argument. So,
right. Like Hobbes and Spinoza, Hume totally dismissed the idea that human beings could discern purpose or virtue from the bare facts of the material world. Hume famously summed up this problem in his is-ought distinction. Just because the natural world is a certain way doesn't mean that we ought to do a certain thing. Discoverable purpose disappeared in Hume's philosophy. All right, this continues. Hume's atheism, also a little bit of an oversimplification. He said some skeptical things about religion. It's not totally clear what his ultimate position was, but whatever. Yeah. Hume's atheism remained a minority position in his time. Most philosophers still believed in at least a deist conception of the universe, though they increasingly rejected the tenets of Judaism and Christianity. Again, I mean, it's just such a shame that the demographics worked out this way. So he has to keep saying shit like this because it's like every European philosopher, except for Spinoza, this time period rejected the tenets of Judaism. That was never an issue there, Most philosophers were also unwilling to concede to Hobbesian positivism, the idea that good and bad are human constructions dependent on power relationships. Instead, philosophers increasingly focused on rebuilding universal morality in the absence of the Bible, having dethroned God as an active moral arbiter for human behavior, and instead redefined God as the Aristotelian unmoved mover alone. Man was free to search for a moral system using reason alone. But these philosophers could no longer rely on Aristotelian teleology. They could not look at the nature of the universe and determine moral ends. Okay, I think we have one last one of these. The legacy of Western thought had relied on natural law, the idea of universal purposes discernible in the universe through the use of reason. Nature was seen not as a justification for behavior, but as a hint of a broader pattern in creation. Things were designed with a purpose. And it was the job of free human beings to act in accordance with right reason in achieving that purpose. What we ought to do is inherent in what is. A hammer was made for hammering, a pen for writing, and a human for reasoning. Human beings could reason about the good and then shape the world around them to achieve it. All right, that's it. That's the passages we're looking at from The Right Side of History by Ben Shapiro. So I guess that summary of Greek natural law reasoning, some Greek or another, I don't know. But I guess that we got at the end. That's the right position. That is what we should think about about morality. That we can just discern the purposes of things in nature, and that what should happen is somehow a function of those purposes.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, it's hard to know where to begin. I mean, you get like a 3-minute dismissal of all of moral philosophy after Aristotle, which is just kind of amazing. It would be nice to hear him like, okay, so like if you think that none of these other efforts to reason about objective morality that don't just explicitly appeal to teleology and nature. So, John Stuart Mill, what does he think about utilitarian arguments? What does he think about Kant's attempt to ground morality in pure reason? What does he think of, I mean, even modern attempts to resuscitate Aristotle, but without his particular views of telos being written into nature? Like David Drake's quote there is exactly right, I guess. Although you'd have to cut off Aristotle, because I guess he thinks Aristotle got everything right. But Socrates, Plato, Hume, Kant, Mill, morons. Like,
yeah, right. Like, and he does. I guess to be fair, he does talk about Kant a little bit elsewhere in the book.
Okay.
I think we're probably going to save that for another one of these segments. That's probably worth one on its own. But certainly the rest of these views, he either utilitarianism is kind of sort of, I mean, you actually got a little bit of that in these passages. It's sort of a vague boogeyman, like thinking that everything's pleasure and pain.
Yeah. Which is not all versions of utilitarianism.
Right. That's also true. Yeah. But yeah, certainly the rest of these views, I mean, he's not going to Ben Shapiro is not going to tell you exactly what he thinks is wrong with like Rawls's theory of justice or, anything like that. But also that, and there are certainly, parts of Aristotelian, moral philosophy that, as you say, can be detached from the part that he likes. But
I mean, even I'm not an Aristotle scholar, but even from what I remember of Aristotle, I know the Catholic Church did this for a long time, but they tacked on this God stuff and designed for a purpose, and that's not really Aristotle himself. He certainly he's thinking teleologically, and for him, morality is thinking about the purpose of all things and thinking about the purpose of a person and the nature of a person. But that reasoning isn't for him grounded in the idea that there was some being who designed us for a particular reason. He was he talked about an unmoved mover, I guess, but he was more deistic. And it wasn't like the later church then tacked on all of this Judeo-Christian theology onto Aristotle.
That is what the Judeo-Christian church did in the,
that's right.
Middle Ages.
Yep.
It's I mean, so, and it's also interesting because I guess the time that I remember people, explicitly appealing to natural law arguments the most, and in a spirit that's very similar to what Shapiro was doing here.
Mm-hmm.
And this is thankfully a little dated, that the culture's moved on from this, but 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I would see like students at Miami-Dade College do this, or I would just run into it in different places. It was very common to, it was very common to have to see people bring this up for like moral arguments against homosexuality, which like this is the kind of thing that came up all the time, right? That your sexual organs were created for this purpose, and therefore it's immoral to not use them for the purpose, which also, like, obviously is not an application that Aristotle would have endorsed.
No. No.
In the Greek version of Greek natural law theory,
Clearly, the Greek natural law theory did not have a problem with alternate uses for our sex organs. I would actually be very curious. Does Shapiro talk about homosexuality when he's talking about the twin pillars of Athens and Jerusalem? There's a bit of a conflict there.
I think there is. He doesn't get into that. I think actually, from what I can recall reading that book, it's been 2 years since I read the whole thing. As I recall, anybody in Athens not being in a heterosexual nuclear family was not mentioned in the book.
Gotcha.
But I mean, like, I guess my big thing is it really shows how like hopelessly arbitrary this stuff is, because like, okay, I mean, it sound like when you say it like that, there's a kind of poetry to it, that you can discern hints of a broader pattern of creation in nature. But it's like, and it's always really hard for me to tell like what level of literalness I'm supposed to take that on. But like, taken seriously, the idea that you could take, like, just on the face of it, the idea that you could take moral cues from nature is like psychotic.
Right. It's I mean, I will say, like, I kind of like Aristotle, and like the way he does, the way he reasons about telos, like I kind of like that. Like, I think there's room for this concept of telos in moral discourse, but it's not this like straightforward, just look at nature and see what things are doing, and then, well, therefore that's what we're supposed to do.
Right.
Because that does just lead to all kinds of obviously psychotic conclusions.
I mean, right. I mean, that, lots of rape and cannibalism and whatnot in nature, and even if you're making the like really strict sort of like, Judeo-Christian quasi-Aristotelian arguments about purpose and stuff, like, I don't know, is the purposes for which a tree, that like anything that seems like a natural purpose for a tree, that like you can, birds will make their nests in it, and you can, use it for shade and all that stuff. I mean, certainly like slicing it up into thin sheets so you can put ink on it as a form of communication is like got to be not on that list. Like that's a lot further from anything that looks like a natural purpose than like having sex with with a different group of humans, like is from anything that looks like the natural purpose of sexual organs. So I don't know. I'm not I mean, I think he might not actually be the cool kids philosopher. I think that
not until he writes his next book and explains in detail what's I want his great treatise of moral philosophy. I want to see his Sam Harris book.
The moral landscape from Ben Shapiro. I'd like that. I mean, I guess maybe we could end on this. I mean, just to go to the remaining member of the trinity of the intellectual dark web, that besides Shapiro and Harris, like all the Jordan Peterson stuff about the West always really reminds me of this, because when Peterson or Shapiro are talking about defending the values of the West, it's always so confusing because it's like,
yeah,
against who, right? Like, so if it were like I would get it. I mean, like, it would, like, on its own terms, I would get it if what they were really concerned about was that, like, too many people were becoming Buddhists or something, you know, that like there's a that there was like a genuinely non-Western, you know, tradition that,
right.
But like all of the stuff that they hate, you know, is that, like, you know, feminism and Marxism and, you know, whatever, like, these are all, you know, pretty rooted in the, you know, European intellectual tradition. Like,
well, but apparently they're rooted in, you know, Marxism was when the West rejected the twin pillars of Athens and Jerusalem, I guess. And so was Nazi Germany, but not you know, not the Inquisitions, not the Crusades. So yeah, it is hard to know exactly what counts as the West and what doesn't.
Well, got to figure this out. Ben, if you're watching, I assume you are. We're going to need some clarification. You can put it on your show. You can put it in the next book. If you just want to do a series of articles for the Daily Wire, that's fine. But we really need some clarification on what exactly you mean by the West. So thank you so much, Ryan.
Absolutely. Good to see you.
You have been watching free public content from Give Them an Argument. To access every single episode of the show, the main show on Monday nights, all of the streams, all of the debate breakdowns, all of the patron-exclusive post-games on Monday nights, all of the patron-exclusive bonus episodes every week, and much, much more, go to patreon.com/Ben Burgis. I cannot resist ending this with, don't be foolish.